Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of a bunch of books that I think are perfect for fall, but before I jump into it, I know that not everybody lives in a place that's transitioning into fall, so if you are one of my friends who lives in a place where you're transitioning into spring, I'm going to have a pinned comment so everybody can recommend spring reading recommendations. That way all of you get to be included on some of this. But then also if you're in the mood for some creepier or more atmospheric foresty type books or things like that, you can pick those up too. Jumping into it though, I'm going to alternate between young adult books and adult books, so there's a little bit of something for everybody. And the first one I'm going to start with would be Sabriel. This is an older young adult fantasy story that has to do with necromancy. Our main character, something has happened with their father, and so now they are kind of trying to figure out what has happened. The magic system has these little bells, and it's very interesting because there's like different layers to transitioning out of our world, and it's really interesting the different kinds of creatures that can come from these different places. It is slightly older YA fantasy, so the writing is almost more formal and perhaps less character focused than a lot of modern fantasy, but if you like that sort of thing, this is going to fit your taste perfect. Next up we have Queen of Blood. This is the first book in a trilogy, an adult fantasy trilogy, and it has one of the most fascinating settings I've come across. I think this is a book that is not entirely character focused because it does span over quite a few years, but I think if you like plot-driven stories and if you like a cool forest setting, you're really gonna like this one. The setup is at this forest, which almost feels like it's a character in and of itself. This forest where our setting takes place, where people live, it has these really creepy spirits. And when I say spirits, I mean different kinds of creatures, different sized creatures, creatures with different amounts of strength. And these creatures have two instincts, and those two instincts basically boil down to protect the forest and then kill. So they, by protecting the forest, want to create life, but because humans hurt the forest, they want to kill all the humans, basically. But there is a woman among the humans who ends up becoming queen. She's like the strongest of the magic users, and she holds all the spirits in check. But if she dies, you gotta make sure there is somebody ready to take over the throne. So there's a lot of girls who have shown signs of magic. They go to almost a magic school setting. They're learning how to use their magic. They eventually often apprentice for people, go out into the forest. And the forest, the things that it does to people are creepy and violent and vicious. If you think that forest settings feel perfect for fall, then this one is the book for you. Next up is a book that, while I personally didn't love this story, is very well loved by a lot of other people, and I'm always very open to recommending books that maybe I personally didn't like, since books are so subjective, and I thought the premise of this one was really interesting. The book would be Iron King by Julie Kagawa. I personally think that this feels more like middle grade. It felt to me closer to Percy Jackson in tone, but just slightly more mature with the occasional curse word that was maybe a little much for a middle grade book, or maybe there would be something mentioned that was a little bit extra dark. So I think there's some darker content that is more suited for young adult, but the tone of the book felt more middle grade. But either way, it is a story where our main character, something is going on with her little brother. He's being really creepy, he's seeing stuff, he's acting weird, he seems like really pumped about their mom getting hurt. Weird stuff is happening, and the character is discovering that there is another world. It's a fae world. If you like fae that are genuinely scary and not super sexy, like apparently fae are in every other book nowadays, that's this book. The fae are scary. It's a lot closer to, I think, traditional folklore about fae and being tricksters and messing with people's minds, things like that, and the main character has to go into the fae world and try to find and rescue her little brother. Next up is Queens of Innisleer. It is a King Lear retelling, and it is boring. I loved it, but it is boring. So it's hard for me to recommend sometimes because you really have to be in the mood to read really flowery, beautiful, poetic writing, which is so normally not my thing. But the themes in this story, the complexities of the characters, the nuance of the characters is so well done. The atmospheric feeling of the book, I think, is fantastic. for fall because it's very forest and nature based. The magic is not a hard magic system the way you might find in a Sanderson book, but it feels more whimsical, it feels more magical, very earth based. And I think the relationships between the characters are very intricate, lots of family drama. If that sounds like your thing, yes, it is kind of not the most action-packed of stories, but if you like moody family drama type stories, this one is perfect for fall. Next up would be another book that I didn't absolutely love, but the premise is so interesting and so suited for the autumn season that I had to mention it, and that would be Bone Crier's Moon. The only reason it didn't really work for me is that you do have an enemies to lovers trope, and I just found I wasn't that captivated by the romance in the story, and it's kind of a bigger part of the story. But the magic is so fascinating. The setup is that we have a character who is a part of this group of women that ferries the spirits of the dead into the afterlife. If they don't do this, those spirits stay and prey on the living. So it's very important that these women continue to take on this role. However, in order to prove themselves to the gods that they are committed, they have to play this magical song, kind of like a siren song, lure their one true love through this song, and then kill that person to prove how dedicated they are. And that's where we meet our main character. This is the task that she is assigned to, and she's like, I gotta do it. It's what I gotta do. I'm destined to be somebody to ferry the dead. So she's not really having too many regrets, but some stuff goes wrong, and this is where the potential for the love story comes into place. But I just thought that the magic was so interesting, and there's so many elements, so many other layers. So for example, they also have to gain extra powers in order to fight the spirits that don't really want to go to the afterlife, and in order to be more powerful, they have to like wear the bones of animals to give them strength, or animals that have great night vision, they wear like the bones of those animals. It's very interesting, kind of creepy. If the idea of wearing bones of animals makes you sad, this is probably a pass for you, but either way, I thought it was so interesting, very different, and definitely a very fascinating setup. Next up, we have a non-fantasy book on this list, and that would be The Stranger by Harlan Coben, and this is kind of a thriller type story, kind of a little bit of a mystery, and I almost want to say it's a murder mystery, except for you don't even know if the person was murdered. It's just kind of like they're gone, and the main character doesn't know why, and the character who is missing is the main character's wife. When I was first picking up this book and reading it, it felt a little generic, but things got really weird, and there's no paranormal type stuff or anything, just like creepy, what the heck is going on type stuff, and I genuinely didn't know what was going on, but I was intrigued, and new perspectives start coming into play. And it's funny because the main character, his interactions with people, he feels like such a real normal person that I was like, is this like an author insert? This just like feels like a normal guy. But it's apparently, from people who have read Harlan Coben, that's something he does masterfully, is it feels just like a normal person going through something that is not normal at all. So I had a good time with it, and if you are somebody who likes reading these sorts of books, this genre in the fall, I had a really good time with this one. Next up, we have Forest of Souls. This follows a character who has been trained to become a spy assassin type individual for the queen, but she's not quite locked in this position just yet. She still has to prove herself, and she's very determined to do so, but she ends up discovering that she might have some magic that is forbidden in her kingdom, and then her world turns upside down, and she kind of has to navigate this creepy forest that's often a thing in books I think are good for fall. She kind of has to figure out how her magic has to do with this and how that has to do with the politics. It's definitely very interesting. The creepy forest is genuinely creepy. I will say this wasn't a book I completely loved. There were so many threads that I think that if you like there being a lot of different things, especially because it's the first book in a series, you can kind of try to figure out where the story is going to go. I think you're going to really like it. The only reason I didn't totally love it is I think I wanted it focused in a little bit more. But either way, I think that the setting makes it a really great read for fall. Next up is a story that I feel like so very few people feel in the middle about. They either absolutely love it and adore it, or totally hate it, and that would be Nevernight. I feel very alone just being a person that's like, I thought it was okay. It is very eccentric, it is very moody, it is very grim and gritty, and it knows it and it embraces it and it mocks itself for it. It's so over the top. I think a little bit it's kind of mocking the assassin trope, because the main character is somebody who has a revenge plot. She goes to an assassin school. It is so bloody and gory and violent at times. There's just a lot of blood in the story, and this main character is trying to get revenge on the people who ruined her life and killed her family. It has such a bizarre writing style. There are footnotes, so there's this sense of the narrator talking to you at times, breaking that wall down, but it's also, I think, just poking fun at the trope, like I said, of assassins, because it's so over the top. And if you want something that's super moody and eccentric like that, this is the book for you. Next up is a book I think is perfect for fall, because I tend to think animal companions or mythological creatures, they just make me think of fairy tales, and I think it's great for the fall season. So the book would be Crown of Feathers by Nikki Powell Preto. Obviously, you can imagine that the companion would be phoenixes, which are awesome. I would describe this as a very politically driven young adult story, and there's also a lot of drama between the main character and her sister, who has kind of manipulated the main character for a lot of her life, and you're seeing this main character who's very sweet and very innocent try to distance herself from this very toxic figure who's one of those cutthroat, I'll do whatever it takes to get what I want type of characters. The political aspects of the story come from the fact that their people have been removed from this land, and they are trying to start a rebellion of Phoenix Riders to take back what is theirs. It's definitely filled with a lot of politics in the sequel as well. There are so many little snippets throughout the story of lore, of stories about the previous Phoenix Riders. If you're somebody who likes a lot of that kind of world building, this book has so much of it. Like I said, the sequel especially. The third one's going to come out next year, so if you want to start this one, read the sequel and then read that third one. Perfect time to do it. Next up is a story that, if you know my tastes, you know I have loved this story for a very long time, and that would be Witcher. I am recommending this because it is about a monster hunter, and monsters, I just can't help but think of Halloween, and the monster hunting part of the story is not actually that big of a part of the story, but I still had to recommend it for that reason alone. Next up, we have Enemies to Lovers to the Extreme, and that would be Serpent and Dove. This one is all the rage right now. I read it and I thought it was pretty entertaining, and if you're looking for an entertaining story, that is this one. And if you're looking for entertaining and will they, won't they, except for like basically of course they will kind of a story, that's this one. It follows a girl who is a witch and a boy who is a witch hunter, and through some bizarre circumstances they are forced to marry each other, and he doesn't know she's a witch, and she's all feisty and he's all traditional and like, women need to be in their place, witches are bad, and she's just like, nah. It's very ridiculous, and if it sounds like a good time to you, it's probably going to be a good time for you. Next up, we have the Dresden Files series. This is a series that has so many books, so if you like it, it can just last you till the end of the year. It follows a wizard detective who lives in our world, but we don't know that magic exists. It's not a known fact. So everybody thinks he's just eccentric and weird, but he's got a friend on the force who's like, hey, Harry, come here. This seems weird to me, and I bet you know more about it. And they kind of work together. He deals with a lot of different types of paranormal beings like vampires, werewolves, that sort of thing, and a lot of the books feel almost like a murder mystery to an extent. From what I understand, I've never finished the series, I've only read the first few, but eventually there is an arc that's kind of an underlying thing throughout the series that builds and builds with each book, but the first ones do feel like kind of mystery of the week type books. Like I said, if you are looking for something to last you until the end of the year, there are so many books in this series. I've heard they get better and better, so this one would be perfect for that. That's it for some fall reading recommendations. Thanks so much for watching, though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.